Alright, this is the first video for my channel. I just created this channel for mining. I've recently gotten into GPU mining. I've been doing it about 2 months now, and I currently have about 1.2 gigahash going, and as soon as I finish this rig I'll be about 1.4 to 1.5. So 1.5 gigahash pretty soon mining. I know a lot of you probably won't know what that means, but it's a good accomplishment for me after just a couple months getting into this. Good amount invested into it so far. But the first video I wanted to do is one that I could not find answers for. One that answers questions I had questions on when I first started looking into this, and that is how many graphics cards does a motherboard or can a motherboard support? And of course you have the physical limitations of the motherboard. You can see here I have 4 PCIe slots on this motherboard here. You can for sure put 2 in, but what about these 2? They don't fit in there. And that's what GPU risers are for. That's what is on this guy right here, right there. Here's another one right here. This one's not as good as this one because this only has the 4 capacitors right here. There's 2 there, 1 there, and 1 there. Sorry, I'm looking through my camera, so I'm having a hard time. But it has 4 capacitors. This one down here is a better one, a much better one. It has 8 capacitors. The more capacitors it has, the more safe the power is. The less disturbances there are in the power, the cleaner it is, etc. But usually the longer it lasts and the more reliable it is, the more capacitors it has. So these GPU risers come with, but they come with little adapters that go inside these PCI slots. Only uses 1 PCIe lane, 1x speed. So this right here is 16x, right there, 16 speed. These, for mining graphics, you only need 1x speed. 1 PCIe lane. So it has this little USB cable right here. So it takes the PCI lane, converts it to a USB, and the USB goes up to the riser and plugs in right there on the back of the riser, and that transmits the signal to the graphics card. When you're mining, the graphics cards don't need a lot of data transferred to them. They are working on the algorithm, so they're computing complex algorithms to create the coin, and that's how you mine it. Once they receive the algorithm from the pool or the host that you're mining to, it's called a pool, the graphics card then works on that. In the case of Ethereum, it's mostly memory intensive. It doesn't use the GPU of the graphics card, the graphics processing unit. It doesn't use that very much at all. It uses the memory on the graphics card, or the video RAM, VRAM. And that's how it generates the coins, is putting together those complex algorithms, and so it doesn't require a whole bunch of data transfer like when you're playing a video game. You're transferring the graphics, and that's very data intensive, and that requires the 16 speed slot for the most modern games to play them up to speed, or 8x depending. But anyway, so these just transfer the small amount of data for the algorithms that are supposed to be done by the graphics card, so they can use 1 PCIe lane on here. Now every motherboard has, and this is really how you can know how many graphics cards your motherboard can support. Every motherboard has a specific amount of PCIe lanes that it supports. This motherboard I looked up has 16 PCIe lanes. Theoretically, it could support 16 GPUs. Obviously, you can only put 4 on here using these little adapters. So what do you do in that situation? They make these 1 to 4 adapters. So this would plug in like that, and then that 1 slot becomes 4. These are available on Amazon for about $25, $23 to $25, as well as the GPU risers. These ones are about $43 for 6. My plan is with this rig, this frame only holds 8 GPUs. So I'm going to use 2 of these cards and do all 8 graphics cards on there, and that should be plenty since this motherboard theoretically can support 16 PCIe lanes. And that is also dependent on your processor as well, the north bridge of the motherboard, how much it supports. There's a few more things involved in it, but generally speaking, what the motherboard supports, you can go to the manufacturer, look up the motherboard, and check and see how many PCIe lanes it has. And that should be close to what you can use, or how many graphics cards. So I might, if I had a robust processor, one that would support all of those lanes, I could put 4 of these adapters on and have 16 GPUs running off this one motherboard. Well, this is a Celeron processor, so I don't think that'll support it, but the motherboard will if I put a robust processor in there that has better PCI lanes available and can support the data transfers. For this one, I am going to go with 8. It should for sure do that. There are other things that can factor in how many it can support, but that gives you a rough idea. Most of these frames, you start running into other limitations: frame size, power supplies. I have this small 650 watt power supply that's powering the motherboard and one of the graphics cards. I might have it power 2. I wouldn't have it power more than 2 graphics cards. I have this big one over here. This is a Chinese mining that's rated for 1800 watts. I will run the rest of them off of that probably. Or I have an HP server power supply, and those are the most common and my most recommended power supplies are the HP server power supplies with a PCIe breakout board, and that allows you to hook up either 6 or 8 cables, PCI cables to it. You can see here I'm using a splitter here, so this one PCI cable from there is powering the riser and the graphics card. Some risers allow you to power them with Molex or SATA power cables. I would not recommend that. I would recommend powering them with the PCIe powers. There's one on the back, one on the side. I've used both. I would highly recommend that because of the power draws. Those PCI or SATA cable adapters have been known to have fail, as well as Molex. Molex, I would definitely choose Molex over PCI or SATA, excuse me. I would choose Molex over SATA if you have to use one of those. But my recommendation would be use the PCIe power source from your power supply there. If possible, even if you're using a splitter like that, just make sure you don't overwhelm them. This is a Radeon 570. It should be able to push about 70 to 80 watts. In software, it's probably about 90. But that should be easy enough for these 16 gauge cables to handle. But anyway, a lot of information there. Hopefully that makes sense. Ask questions if you have them below. This is new to me, but computers are not new to me. I've been in computers for a long time, and I know hardware really well. So if you have any questions, just ask below, and I'd be happy to answer them.